We have some great news on the issue of civil liberties. The Daily Beast is reporting that by a vote of 293 to 123, the House of Representatives voted in favor of an amendment that would cut funding for the NSA spying programs. So the warrantless collection of Americans' emails, browsing, and chat history would have to stop immediately under this proposal. Representatives James Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin, he was one of the co-sponsors of the bill. Zoe Lofgren, who I actually never heard of, that's a Democrat from California, and Thomas Massie, a Republican of Kentucky, sponsored the bill. So it's actually a genuine bipartisan effort. It's in addition to the Defense Appropriations Bill, and needless to say, a companion amendment would still have to pass the Senate. It would have to be approved by the Senate before it could become law. And is that going to happen? No, I don't think so. My honest opinion is that I'm like 70%, 80% sure it wouldn't get through the Senate, and the reason why it wouldn't get through the Senate is that they are, of course, bought off by the companies that do the data collection. So all the senators are going to vote with the companies that want to continue to do the data collection. But still, even though it's likely not to pass the Senate, this is the biggest act of defiance against the NSA yet since we got the news of the leaks. So this is definitely something to celebrate. It shows that we're pushing in the right direction. And this also, by the way, it highlights something that we brought up the other day. I did a whole segment about how, libertarians and progressives, we really should get along much better than we do because we agree on so many different things. Well, this is one of the areas right here where it was the libertarians and the progressives that got together. And when I say libertarians, in this case, I mean a lot of Tea Party Republicans in the House who I probably disagree with on an overwhelming majority of things. But they're right about the NSA and the fact that that's encroaching on our liberties, and the progressive Democrats got together with them, and they worked together, and they were able to get this through. And look, man, I think the bottom line with this whole conversation here is that it's not debatable. That's the thing that drives me crazy, is that the mainstream media will give you the misperception that an issue like the NSA spying that's been going on is debatable, like there are two legitimate sides to the conversation. And there's really not. And the reason why that's the case is this thing called the Fourth Amendment. In fact, I know I've done this many times before on air, but let me read you the literal text of the Fourth Amendment, and you can determine whether or not you think data collection of over 300 million Americans violates this. It says, quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." That word particularly is very important, okay? Because what they're saying is, look, nobody's saying you can't do a search when you need to do a search if you're some form of law enforcement, right? But what you need to do is you need to go, this is why we have checks and balances. You go to an independent judiciary and you ask them, well, look, here's the evidence as to why we think we should be able to spy on this person or that person, and then they'll issue you a warrant to spy specifically and particularly on the person or thing that you're talking about. But what we've done after 9/11 and what we've done wrongly by interpreting the Patriot Act wrongly is we've decided, well, you can actually look at over 300 million Americans' emails, text messages, phone calls, all personal data, internet searches, etc., based on this broad idea that they're all, by default, terrorism suspects. But wait, there's no evidence that we're all terrorism suspects. You can't do a dragnet collection on all of us. And look, these programs don't work anyway, man. I mean, we've gone over it. They haven't been able to provide a single example where it's actually true that they were able to prevent a terrorist attack because of the data collection. If that was the case, maybe they would have been able to stop the Boston bombing. I mean, we had this spying apparatus in place for years before then, and they were still able to do that successfully. So it doesn't work. But even if it did work, that's the thing. This is where I part even from a lot of other people, where I say even if it did work, even if it did prevent terrorism, they're not allowed to do that. The whole purpose of a constitution is to say these things are off the table. And the final thing I'll throw out there is one of the guys who sponsored this bill, again, Representative Sensenbrenner, he's the guy that wrote the portion of the Patriot Act that the government is now using and the executive branch is now using to say, well, this part right here in the Patriot Act allows us to collect everybody's information. But the guy who literally wrote that provision says, no, it doesn't. I wrote it. I should know. You're using my provision wrongly. You're interpreting it wrongly. So when the fucking author of the thing says, stop misinterpreting the thing that I wrote and using it for something that I didn't intend it to be used for, you know that they're wrong. So credit to the House of Representatives in this respect. That's, a phrase I haven't uttered in a very, very long time, but good on them, and now we'll sit back and watch as the Senate slaps us in the face.